Well, I'm very happy to be here today. It's great to see so many faces that I'm familiar with, but also some new ones. And looking at the crowd, I believe that most people here will think Hyperloop will become reality. Some might still be a bit skeptical, but if you look at the Hyperloop developments over the last few years, there has been a lot of serious development, and people are starting to take Hyperloop also more serious as a future mobility solution. I think at this point the question is not really much focused on is it technically feasible, because I think that's what most of you will believe, but really where does Hyperloop fit within the European mobility landscape? And that's what Hyper4Rail is all about. We're trying to harmonize and bring all the European players together to come up with an interoperable system that aligns seamlessly with all the rail that we have within Europe. And my role as project coordinator for Hyper4Rail is to make sure that this plan that we make is technically sound, is something that we built in a partnership and collaboration with all the different players in Europe, and is also actually implementable. For those that don't know, a short recap of the project. So Hyper4Rail is part of Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking under FA7, which explores non-traditional emerging guided transport systems. And our project has 4 core objectives. The first one is to deliver a harmonized and implementable concept. We also identify the use case, how and where should we implement Hyperloop, and investigate the business case, the economic and financial one. Then we want to validate the concept and the technology. Is this actually feasible with today's technology, and what do we still have to do to bring this actually into reality? And then we'll also provide a plan for the developers, for the industry, for the Commission on how to move this forward. The project has a budget of 2.3 million euros. It's 24 months. We're now halfway. And like Kathleen said, we work with quite a large consortium of 27 partners. And the project is funded by the Commission and Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking. We do this with 27 partners. A large part of the Hyperloop developers that have to agree and align on what Hyperloop is, what it should look like, what it should do. We don't only have the Hyperloop developers, but also a large group of experts from the industry that help us on specific topics. We work with research institutes, of course very important operators and infrastructure managers that help us set the expectations and needs of the system, and also the ecosystem, which is very important. We have here our Hyperloop group with some new faces, which I'm very happy to see, but it's also very important we start involving the industry outside of our Hyperloop community more and inform them about the latest developments. The project is set up in a way where we try to really engage as much as possible with external stakeholders through an approach that's aligned and familiar to the industry. We first identify the problem. What is it that we really try to solve? Only by starting from this very beginning and finding alignment on some of these high-level objectives is how we can come to agree to what a Hyperloop should in the end look like. When we have identified the problem, we work on a concept of operations. How do we see Hyperloop operate and work in our European context, in our European transport mobility system? Should it be vehicles that are small and travel at high frequency, or do we want something that looks more familiar with a train? How is this integrated? Then when this is set, we want to set a clear set of requirements and a system architecture for the industry to be able to develop Hyperloop. And then on the key aspects for interoperability, we want to provide some specifications for the technology to prevent some of the challenges that we're facing today within the rail sector. Then this is more focused on the actual solution, but we also want to actually look at the business case and the use case of Hyperloop. So that's why we are doing and have done a network analysis for Europe on what Hyperloop could actually mean. And we have identified some potential routes where Hyperloop could be implemented first. And we are currently working on validating the business case to actually show that Hyperloop is economically feasible. Then when we have done this, we try to agree among the partners that this concept that we have come up with is the one that we prefer to move forward for within Europe. And we don't only try to agree on this with the partners, but also with external stakeholders, operators from rail sector, with infrastructure managers, commission, member states and such. And we do this 3 times, so that we can learn and improve and incorporate the feedback from these external stakeholders. When this is done, we go to the second phase, which is planned for next year. We validate the technology, we want to engage with the industry and see if we can build and what still needs to happen to make Hyperloop reality. And in parallel, we work on a roadmap to really step by step set out what needs to happen. The first step that we have worked on is to set up a cost-benefit analysis for a European Hyperloop network. And this we have done according to all the EU guidelines and using data mostly from Eurocontrol, where we have set up a model to predict the demand for a Hyperloop system. We then looked at the different benefits, such as what would be costs, such as what would be the financial impacts, what would be the socio-economic impacts of building Hyperloop, what would be the effect of modal shift from, for example, aviation to rail or Hyperloop. And then we looked at what would be the benefits, the financial benefits, the socio-economic benefits, and put this in a large model. In parallel, we worked on the concept of operations, where we have engaged with various stakeholders, such as Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking, the Commission, Hyperloop developers, infrastructure managers, project developers, a very broad set of relevant parties, and we collected their input. What do they find important from a new and future mobility system? Is it important that it's cheap, high performance, sustainable? What EU goals and ambitions should it be aligned to? But we've not only talked to the decision makers and the policy makers and such, we also engage and work with actual users. So we have asked the public of what they would expect from a Hyperloop system. And with all of this together, we have developed the concept of operations. Putting all of that work together, we started working on a vision for Europe. That is very much aligned with all the investments and work that we already have done in Europe in rail. What you see here are 3 different sizes of network, where we have a core network, which is indicated in green, the shortest one, where we try to really optimize the benefits to costs. And this is a network that, well, I'm not sure if this works, but it's this part. Then we have a more comprehensive network that connects all of the capitals across Europe. And then we have an even larger scenario, which we call the comprehensive scenario, where we make the network also a lot more resilient. But what is very important is that this network, we really try to make as complementary to our rail networks as possible. And you can see this, the lines in between is the existing European rail system that we have, where the red lines are the high-speed lines. So you see, for example, in France, from Paris, very clearly the different routes. So there's almost no overlap with these networks, and actually, as I will show you later, building a Hyperloop network like this brings a lot of additional benefits and demand to these existing rail lines. Now we combined this network, these 3 different networks, with some of the input from our stakeholder analysis and also the model that we've made. And we basically did a sweep across different parameters that people are currently discussing about and probably also have some discussions about later. What is the ideal network? What is the ideal speed? Should we build a system that stops at every station in between, or should we build a system that maybe provides direct connections? Where should stations be? Do we want them at airports? Do we want them outside the cities? Do we want them inside the cities? And how many stations do we want in between? Do we really want to focus on just the capitals, or do we also want to involve smaller cities? And we looked at all these variables and checked what this would do on the costs and benefits of the system. And here we see a couple of interesting things, but most notably, the ideal reference scenario that came out of this sweep and analysis is that speed is very important. Really, to create a modal shift from aviation to rail, and to create the demand that you need to be able to finance a system like this, speed is key. Additionally, some other conclusions that we have is that skipping stations creating directions and including high-speed switches is an essential element. And then, to top this off, adding intermediate stations does not do too much to the benefits, but might be actually necessary to create the support for all the cities and regions that you pass through. The conclusions were very positive. We've tried to be conservative because we know there's a lot of skepticism also around Hyperloop. And from this model, we see that if we would build the second network, which came from our scenario as the ideal network, where we connect all the capitals, that we could create a huge modal shift. 50% of aviation could be moved to Hyperloop. And not only this, we actually increase and support rail. You see this in the green lines, which all indicate an increase in usage of existing high-speed rail and normal rail. So by creating this Hyperloop and rail integrated network, we can save significant amounts of CO2. But I think the best part is that it has a very, very strong economic case. Today, this would have a 650 billion euro economic net present value. One more thing. In this analysis, we actually also already assumed that rail will get better, faster, more efficient, and also aviation. So really we try to involve all of the future improvements that you also see in the other mobility systems. What we're currently working on is the concept of operations. Using this network model that we have developed and the discussions that we're having with our stakeholders, we're trying to set some parameters to have discussions about with you and our stakeholders on what Hyperloop should be. Currently, we think at Hyper4Rail that the system should be focused on business and leisure travelers, on these larger distances that we have, that we connect, these larger cities. We want to provide frequent connections. We want an experience that is accessible for people with reduced mobilities and with minimal security. It should connect all the large cities and high-demand airports, and we expect stations to be at these airports or around the city peripherals, very well connected to existing urban mobility. We expect that the system should provide frequent operations where you can leave every 30 minutes, with convoys of trains, with spots of around 40 vehicles leaving every so many minutes. Speeds of about 750 km an hour, and actually quite high accelerations, but still within what is comfortable for passengers. Then to conclude, if you maybe spotted on this picture, there's a huge demand. On the highest the highest demand parts, we're talking about 340 million passengers annually, which is incredible. And to be able to meet this demand, you need also a high capacity system. So Hyperloop has to provide at least 30,000 passengers per direction per hour to fulfill this demand. We do this with vehicles of 40 passengers per vehicle, and of course we want the safest system. That's at least as safe as current rail and aviation. And of course, for it to be competitive, the pricing needs to be competitive. So we're now calculating with a pricing of 50 cents per kilometer, which is roughly the same as taking the train or an airplane. And of course, being a highly efficient transport mode, we set an ambitious energy target. These are our conclusions so far. And actually, most of this is also still under discussion with some of the key stakeholders. And I hope that today we can discuss some of these results in our masterclasses and workshops. What is upcoming is the following. We're still working on defining the requirements and analyzing different concepts. We're setting up a system architecture so that we all speak the same language. We're working on developing a roadmap on what steps we have to take into the future. And in the end, we also want to define what a demonstration facility for Europe could look like. We're also actively working still on many research topics, such as levitation, can we provide the right comfort, should Hyperloop be for freight, questions around cooling in the vacuum environment, switching, vacuum, and making sure, of course, that the system is safe. and going through all the different safety challenges that we have to resolve. So what happens when there's a fire or a breach in the vehicle, so that we have convincing and reliable answers to these questions. Now, I think the real impact of this project is not only in all the work that we have done. It's about setting an ambition for Europe and making a larger impact. And this is going to take some time. We're not there today, and it's probably going to take many, many, many more years. We're only at the start. However, Hyperloop can be a new layer on Europe's existing transport system. It can improve European unity. It can catalyze Europe's integration by seamlessly linking EU capitals, reduce the externalities of transport, and accelerate towards climate change, climate neutrality, improve our economic growth, and to conclude, deliver a high-capacity, competitive, and sustainable European system. All ambitions that we have set together in the European Union to achieve. And I think we can be ambitious. Currently, these are, on the right, you see our 10T goals. We state that by 2040, we want to go 160 kilometers an hour or faster. We are working very hard to create a 10T network where we use a single signaling system. And we're trying to connect our major airports. But if we really want to be ambitious, we can do so much more. We can build a future where our average speed is not 160 kilometers an hour or faster, but 500 kilometers an hour faster. We can create a system that's fully interoperable on all aspects, with a very high capacity, and we can truly create a competitive and alternative to European flights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.